Hey, so as you know, here at Backyard Beans, we brew a lot of cold brew, and I'm sure you've enjoyed some of that. But if you have not, or if you like to brew your own iced coffee at home, I'm gonna give you some tips on how to do that using a V60. So this brews really good flash brewed coffee. That's the term for this. It's not cold brew, because we're gonna use hot water, and we're gonna brew a concentrate. So a few things we're gonna do to do that is use less water. We're gonna grind a little finer, and we're gonna use a little bit more agitation during brewing so that we get a lot of coffee extracted. So I used a grind setting of 10 on my Baratza Encore. This is a very fine setting. It's more fine than I would use for a pour over normally. And I'm gonna use 22 grams of coffee. And my water, I want it to be nice and hot, so 205 degrees. I'm gonna bloom this with 60 grams of water and then give it a nice stir. So stirring the bloom makes sure that nothing is left dry so that everything starts extracting right away. Alrighty, so we're gonna let that sit for 40 seconds. So I found in my testing that brewing into the carafe, the concentrate, and then adding it to the ice ends up melting a little bit less ice in the end. So I tested that, putting ice into the carafe and brewing into it, and I weighed out my ice, saw how much was melted, and I compared that to brewing a concentrate and pouring it over the ice. I found that this method melts a little less ice, so that's good. We don't want our iced coffee to be too watery. So I'm doing 2 pours. My first pour went up to 140 grams. We're gonna let that sit until about 1 minute and 10 seconds, and then add the last pour up to 210 grams. So I like this recipe, it's very simple. 1 to 10 ratio is super easy to remember. So if you're using 22 grams of coffee, that means you're gonna use 220 grams of hot water to brew with. So this ratio I'm using is good for a 12 to 16 ounce cup, depending on if you're adding cream or sugar or how much ice you're adding to it. So after you do that last pour, I like to give this a little twirl. That helps pull down any coffee that's sticking to the walls of the brewer to ensure that you get a really strong cup of coffee. So flash brewed coffee, it does taste different than cold brew. Cold brew is known for its smooth acidity, really like syrupy taste, like not much bitterness at all. So flash brew, it really helps the acidity to pop. So it's just like fresh hot coffee, only iced, so it gives you a much different experience. So I'm brewing today our Shore Traffic. This is our summer blend that's available until the end of August. Another great option for iced coffee would be our Ethiopia Guji. This is a wash process coffee. I love Ethiopia wash coffees iced because they're nice and floral and peachy and lemon and tea-like. But Shore Traffic also is really nice as an iced coffee. It has a good balance to it. I was getting notes of almond and brown sugar with some of that peach note coming through. So I need to go grab my ice. We are at 2.5 minutes and this brew just finished up. So the nice thing about this is this coffee is cooling down a little bit now. We're losing a few degrees. So when I add this over the ice, it'll help. It's still gonna melt it very quickly, but it'll help make it less watery. All right, we got our ice. So I don't find it's very important to measure out your ice. For this recipe, I just know that I'm gonna need a full 16 ounce cup of ice. However, if you do wanna measure it, it's gonna be a little bit more than double the amount of hot water you use. So I use 220 grams of hot water. If you wanna measure your ice, I would recommend at least 220 grams of ice. And if you do that, most of it will melt except for a few cubes. So you might want to add a little bit more ice once you pour it in. So there you have it, iced coffee, flash brewed.